Hi. Today's story begins in a relationship that felt real to one person and was never real to the other. What started with hope, patience, and quiet trust soon unraveled into something colder and far more deliberate. Before we begin, a brief disclosure. The voices in this story were created with AI assistance, but the writing, structure, and direction are human. What follows is a fictionalized narrative inspired by relationship drama shared online. Now, enjoy the story.
I wasn't supposed to be there early. The original plan was 6:30. I moved it to 6 because my last review session got canceled, and I figured I would swing by. Grab her before dinner, maybe catch her mid-routine so she would do that half-annoyed thing where she pretends I am disrupting her evening but still lets me in. I parked on the street instead of the driveway. Her mom's car was in the garage, and I didn't want to block it. Walked up through the mudroom door next to the garage, the one that is always unlocked because the latch doesn't catch right. I was maybe 4 steps inside when I heard voices. Get the photo first. Then we say he cheated. Fine, but not before graduation. I stood there. My phone was in my hand. I don't remember deciding to open the voice recorder. I just looked down and it was already recording. I held it toward the wall. The last 8 seconds of their conversation pressed into the microphone before someone moved a chair, and the voices scattered into something I couldn't parse. 8 seconds. I stopped the recording, walked back out through the mudroom, closed the door behind me the same way I had opened it carefully, so the latch wouldn't click. Saturday in my car for maybe 2 minutes, maybe 5. I don't know. Then I picked up my phone and typed one message. Don't come by my house again. Sent it, put the phone face down on the passenger seat, and drove home in complete silence. 6 months earlier, none of this existed. She transferred into our circle through a mutual one of those slow arrivals where someone starts showing up at group things, and nobody remembers exactly when they became a regular. She was just there one day, and then she kept being there, and eventually I stopped noticing the difference between before and after. She was quiet. There is a difference. Shy people want to speak and cannot. She seemed like someone who had already decided most conversations weren't worth entering. She had sit at the edge of things, half listening, half somewhere else, and occasionally say something so precisely timed, it made you realize she had been tracking the entire room the whole time. I liked that. I liked it more than I should have. I am not the kind of person who falls fast. I am the kind who falls specific. I don't need grand gestures or constant attention. I need patterns, consistency. I need someone to keep showing up, keep choosing to sit in the same place, keep saying yes to the small invitations, the ones that don't matter enough to fake. And she did. She kept showing up. She kept sitting near me. She kept saying yes to the walks after group hangouts, to the late drives, to the coffee runs where we had talk about nothing for 40 minutes, and I would come home feeling like something quiet and good had just happened. I built meaning out of those moments the way you build a fire, small pieces first, then larger ones, each one placed carefully on the assumption that the structure underneath was solid. She never said anything definitive, never "I like you" or "this is something" or any of the words that would have made it official. But she didn't say no either. She existed in this space that was just ambiguous enough to let me fill it with hope, and just present enough to make that hope feel reasonable. Her friends knew, my friends knew. We weren't official, but we were understood. The kind of thing where people leave the seat next to you open because everyone assumes she will take it, and she does. And nobody comments because it is already obvious. I told myself this was what real looked like when it was still growing. Not fireworks, not declarations. Just 2 people choosing each other in small, repeated ways until the choosing became a fact. I thought the silence between her words was depth. It took me a long time to understand that sometimes silence isn't someone struggling to open up. Sometimes it is just empty. The first thing I really noticed, not just registered and filed away, was that I was always the one reaching. Every text conversation started with me. Every plan originated from my side. Every emotional investment was mine to deposit and hers to receive, or tolerate, or let happen. I couldn't tell the difference, and for a while, I didn't try to. When I would text her, she would respond. Not fast, not slow, just adequately. Enough to sustain the thread, but never enough to build on it. I would ask her about her day and get 2 sentences. I would send her something I found funny and get a reaction emoji. I would suggest meeting up and she would agree. But the agreement always had this flatness to it, like she was confirming an appointment, not accepting an invitation. I explained it away. She is reserved. She is not a phone person. She shows up in person. and that is what counts. Then there was the physical distance. Not dramatic, not flinching away or putting up walls. More like a constant low-grade absence even when she was right there. She had sit next to me, but her body never quite settled. Her eyes would meet mine, and then drift not away from me exactly, just towards something else that apparently required her attention more. She never reached for my hand, never initiated contact, never leaned in. I was always the one closing the gap, and she was always the one letting me, and I mistook permission for participation, close enough to keep me hoping, never close enough to let me rest. And then there was the laugh. It happened at a group hangout, maybe 2 months in. Someone, I think it was one of the group leader's friends, made a comment about me and her, something light, teasing. The kind of thing people say when they think they are watching a love story develop in real time. The reaction wasn't surprise. It wasn't, "Oh, really?" or the awkward shuffle people do when someone calls out something everyone's been pretending not to see. It was a half smile, quick, shared between 3 or 4 people in a way that excluded me completely. The kind of smile that only exists when everyone in the room already knows something, and the thing they know is about the one person who doesn't. I didn't understand it then. I filed it under group dynamics and moved on. Later, much later, I would replay that moment and realize what I was actually seeing. People watching someone walk into a game he thinks is his life. I brought it up once, not as an accusation. As a question. We were sitting in my car after a drive, parked somewhere forgettable, and I said something like, "Hey, are you good? You have felt kind of far away lately." She looked at me, not defensive, not guilty, just mildly inconvenienced, like I had pointed out a stain on her shirt that she had already decided to ignore. "You are overthinking again," she said. That sentence. I need you to understand what that sentence does when it is deployed correctly. It doesn't address the concern. It reclassifies the person raising it. The problem stops being her behavior and becomes my perception. I am not noticing something real, I am manufacturing something false. And the fix isn't for her to change, it is for me to stop seeing what I am seeing. I wanted to push back. I almost did, but then I thought about how I had sound needy, paranoid, insecure, and I swallowed it. A few days later, I mentioned something similar to someone I thought was neutral. A girl from the periphery of the group, quieter than the rest, seemed thoughtful, seemed like she actually paid attention to people instead of just performing around them. She listened, nodded, then said, very gently, "She is not very expressive. That is just how she is. Don't overthink it." The exact same framework. Different packaging at the time. I felt reassured. 2 separate people telling me the same thing. Maybe the problem really was me. Maybe I was projecting insecurity onto a girl who just wasn't built to perform affection the way I wanted. I backed off, stopped asking, recommitted to patience and trust, and all the things you are supposed to bring to a relationship that is worth keeping. I wanted to believe them, not because I was weak, because the cost of believing was so much lower than the cost of admitting that everything I had been building might be hollow. So I stayed. I made the doubt smaller. I gave myself permission to stop looking at what was wrong so I could keep living inside what I needed to be right. The signs didn't arrive as revelations. They accumulated like weather. Her texts got shorter, not hostile, just progressively emptier. I would send 3 sentences and get back 1. I would ask a question and receive an answer that closed the conversation instead of continuing it. After a while, I realized I was doing something I had never done before in any relationship. Performing enthusiasm for 2 people, generating all the warmth, all the momentum, all the reasons to keep going and watching, none of it come back. When we were together, she was physically present the way furniture is present, occupying space. She had listened when I talked, but her responses had this quality, like she was selecting from a menu of appropriate things to say rather than actually reacting. Her laugh came a half-beat late. Her attention kept drifting to her phone, to the window, to anywhere that wasn't the space between us. One night, I watched her check the time 3 times in 20 minutes. Not obviously, just quick glances. The way you do when you are counting down to when something ends. Graduation was approaching. 2 months out, then 6 weeks. In a normal relationship, or what I thought was a normal relationship, that proximity to a major life change would pull people closer. You had talk about plans, about what happens next, about whether the thing you built survives the transition. She never brought it up, not once. And when I tried, she redirected so smoothly, It took me hours to realize the conversation had been steered away from anything that required her to project us into a future. She was withdrawing on a schedule. I just didn't know whose. Then the silences started. Not between us, around us. In the group, I would walk up to a conversation already in progress, and it would die. Not gradually, the way topics naturally wind down, abruptly, mid-sentence. Someone would stop talking, someone else would glance sideways, and then a new subject would appear from nowhere, delivered too brightly, too quickly, like a scene change in a bad play. It happened 3 times before I stopped dismissing it. The 4th time, I caught a fragment before it was swallowed. Someone, I think the group leader, saying something that ended with, "After graduation," and then seeing me and switching to something about a restaurant. Another time, the photos, followed by a quick headshake from someone else. Direction. Not here. Don't say it here. Pieces, shards of something I couldn't assemble yet. Each one individually dismissible. Together, they formed the outline of a shape I didn't want to see. I wasn't overthinking anymore. I was beginning to realize I hadn't been thinking enough. There was a night maybe 2 weeks before everything ended when I sat alone in my room and let myself do the thing I had been avoiding. I stopped defending the relationship. I stopped explaining away the gaps. I just lined everything up. The one-directional effort, the flat responses, the body that never quite arrived, even when she was sitting right next to me. The group's half-smiles. The conversations that died when I appeared. The fragments after graduation, the photos. Don't say it here, her increasing distance timed perfectly to an approaching deadline I didn't set. The quiet girl's reassurance. Don't overthink it. My ex's reset button. You are overthinking again. The same message, same effect, from 2 different mouths. I didn't have proof. I didn't have a confession or a screenshot or a recording. I had something worse, a pattern, so consistent it couldn't be coincidence, and so distributed it couldn't be one person. Whatever the specific truth was, and I didn't know it yet, this much was already clear. What I had been living in had never operated like a real relationship. The mechanics were wrong. The weight distribution was wrong. The direction of care only ever flowed one way, and the only thing flowing back was just enough to keep me in place. Something shifted in me that night. Not anger, something colder. When pain crosses a certain threshold, it stops looking like emotion. It becomes clarity. I didn't confront her. I just stopped filling the silence with my own hope. From that point on, I watched. I listened. I kept my face the same and my questions light, and I noticed everything that came back different now that I had stopped needing it to be good. I didn't have evidence yet, but for the first time, I understood that the scariest thing wasn't whatever she was hiding. It was how many people around me seemed to already be living inside it. 2 weeks later, I was standing in that mudroom. The plan was simple: get there early, surprise her before dinner. I had even stopped at a place she liked to pick up something on the way. The bag was still in my hand when I heard the voices. At first, it was just noise, multiple people in the kitchen or the living room, hard to tell through the wall. I figured her friends were over. Normal, I almost called out. Then I heard the group leader's voice, clear, comfortable, the cadence of someone running a meeting they have run before. I stopped, stood still, listened. Most of it was muffled, scraps of sentences, someone laughing, someone agreeing, the low hum of a group that is aligned on something. Then a stretch where the voices synced up enough for words to land. They were talking about me. Not about me, the way friends talk about a friend's boyfriend. Not gossip, not teasing, not concern. They were talking about me the way project managers talk about a deliverable, logistics, timing, sequence of operations. The dare, that is where it started. Someone, the group leader, maybe someone before the group leader. I had never find out exactly, had floated the idea. Get her to date him. See how far it goes. The dare had a shelf life and a cleanup plan. The shelf life was graduation. The cleanup was a story. They were building the story that night. Get the photo first, something staged, something that would look like proof of something I hadn't done. Then we say he cheated. The narrative, my character, rewritten by committee, fine. But not before graduation, the timeline, controlled, coordinated, my expiration date, set by people I had sat next to at lunch for months. The casualness was the worst part. No one sounded guilty. No one sounded conflicted. They sounded like people tying up loose ends on something they had gotten bored of. I had been a project, I was being decommissioned. My phone was already in my hand. I opened the recorder, held it close to the wall. 8 seconds, that is all I got before a chair scraped, and someone stood up and the audio broke into fragments. 8 seconds of voices I recognized, discussing the disposal of a relationship I had thought was mine. I stopped the recording, looked at the bag in my other hand, the food I had picked up for her from the place she liked, set it on the shelf by the door, walked out, got in the car. Saturday there. Then I sent the text, "Don't come by my house again." 7 words. No question mark. No opening for dialogue. Not a conversation starter, a door closing. I turned the phone face down and drove home with the windows up and the radio off. She texted back within minutes. What? What are you talking about? Then a call. I let it ring. Another text. Can you please tell me what is going on? Then, did something happen? Then, you are scaring me. The progression was textbook confusion, concern, soft panic. Exactly what you would send if you were innocent. Also, exactly what you would send if you were guilty and trying to figure out how much the other person knows before choosing your next move. I didn't respond. Not because I was being strategic, because I genuinely didn't know what a response would accomplish. When someone has been fluent in a lie for 6 months, arguing with them is just handing them more material. They will explain. They will reframe. They will find the angle that makes you the unreasonable one, and they will deliver it with the same face that made you fall for them in the first place. The phone kept lighting up. I put it in a drawer. What I sat with that night wasn't rage. Rage would have been simpler. Rage has momentum, it pushes you toward action, confrontation, release. This was something heavier. This was sitting in a quiet room and realizing that a significant number of moments I had stored as real as evidence that I mattered to someone, that I had been chosen, that the small, ordinary acts of being together meant what I thought they meant. All of those moments may have only been real for me. She was in every one of them, but she might have been performing in every one of them too. And I had no way to separate the genuine from the staged, because I had experienced them all the same way, completely, honestly, without armor. That is the thing about being lied to by someone you love. The betrayal isn't retroactive. It doesn't go back and corrupt the memories. The memories stay exactly as they were. You just have to carry them now, knowing they might mean nothing. I didn't sleep much, but I wasn't spiraling either. I was doing something quieter and more dangerous, recalculating. Figuring out who needed to know the truth before someone else told them a different one. They moved fast. I will give them that. Within 2 days, the narrative was already shifting. Not publicly, not yet, but I could feel the groundwork being laid. A friend mentioned that someone had asked if things were okay between me and her. Another friend said they had heard I had been acting weird lately. The language was careful, not accusatory, just positioning. Seeding the idea that whatever was about to surface, the instability was on my side. The group leader was good at this, setting the stage without leaving fingerprints, making sure that by the time the story broke, the audience would already be primed to see me as the problem. I understood what was happening because I had heard them plan it. Then we say he cheated. They were building toward that frame, and they were building it the way professionals build PR campaigns, slowly, through implication, through the careful repetition of a version, until it feels like common knowledge. So I made a choice. I didn't blast the recording on social media. I didn't send it to everyone I knew. I didn't make a spectacle of myself or turn my pain into content. I sent it to 3 people. The first was someone respected by both social circles, a mutual who had known me long enough to recognize my voice and hers, and who carried enough credibility that their assessment would hold weight. The second was her parents. Not to punish her, because if the plan was to frame me as a cheater post-graduation, her family would eventually hear that version. I wanted the truth in the room before the lie arrived. The third was a close friend of mine who I knew was being approached by the group leader's orbit. Someone who was about to be fed a story. I gave them the counter-evidence first. That was it. 3 people, 3 copies of 8 seconds. No manifesto, no public meltdown, just the minimum necessary to stop a false narrative from solidifying. The effect was quiet but immediate. The friend who had been asking if I was acting weird went silent. The group leader's positioning campaign hit a wall. It didn't expect people who had already heard the recording and weren't interested in the alternative version. Someone in the outer circle reached out to me directly and said, "I didn't know. I am sorry." My ex tried to call again, then texted, "We need to talk about this. You are taking things out of context." out of context. 8 seconds of people planning to fabricate infidelity and frame a timeline around my graduation, and the defense was context. I didn't respond. A few of them went quiet after that. Not apologetic, just recalibrated. The way people go quiet when they realize the person they were planning to bury has the shovel. But the fallout didn't feel like victory. It felt like inventory. I was counting the people who had really known what was happening, and watching the number grow larger than I had estimated. The dare hadn't been a secret between 2 or 3 people. It had been an open one, a casual one. The kind of thing that gets mentioned in group chats and met with laughing emojis rather than objections. Nobody had needed to hate me to let this happen. They had just needed to find my situation less important than their comfort. The thing about the quiet girl is that she had been kind to me. Not performatively kind, not the loud, visible kindness people deploy, so others can see them being good. She was the one who would remember small details I had mentioned weeks ago. The one who would check in with a low-key message after a hard day. The one who, when the rest of the group was being chaotic, would sit slightly apart and seem like she was actually paying attention. I trusted her, not in a dramatic way, I just never had a reason not to. She existed in my mental map as one of the decent ones. The person in the room who, if something were really wrong, would say something. So when the truth about her surfaced, it didn't land like the dare. The dare was a punch. This was the floor disappearing. It came out sideways, the way these things usually do. Not a confession, not at first. A mutual friend mentioned, almost in passing, that the quiet girl had felt bad about the whole thing for a while. The phrasing assumed I already knew she was involved. I didn't. I dug carefully, talked to the 1 or 2 people who were being honest with me by that point, pieced it together. She had known from early on, not the full plan, maybe not every detail of the photo setup or the cheating frame, but she knew the relationship started as a dare. She knew it wasn't real. She had been present in conversations where it was discussed openly. At some point, she had even pushed back gently, the way she did everything. A quiet objection, a maybe this isn't cool, something small enough to register as conscience but not large enough to actually stop anything. And then she had kept going, kept showing up, kept being my friend, kept reassuring me when I expressed doubts. She is not very expressive. Don't overthink it. That sentence again, except now I heard it differently. It wasn't reassurance. It was maintenance. She was keeping me inside the lie, not because she wanted to hurt me, but because leaving me there was easier than pulling me out. She had watched me invest months of genuine emotion into something she knew was hollow. She had watched me build hope on a foundation she knew was sand. And every time I would come close to seeing the truth, every time my instincts had fired correctly, she had talked me back into the dark. When I finally confronted her, if you can call a single flat text a confrontation, she said what I expected her to say. I didn't know what to do. 5 words, and they were probably true. She probably didn't know what to do. She probably felt stuck between loyalty to the group and fairness to me, and she probably told herself that staying silent was neutral, that not actively participating in the cruelty meant she wasn't part of it. But silence isn't neutral when you are watching someone get hurt. It is a choice. It is the quietest form of participation, and it is the one that is hardest to hold anyone accountable for, because the person can always say they didn't do anything. That is exactly the point. They didn't do anything. My ex had been the blade. The group leader had been the hand. But the quiet girl and everyone like her, everyone who knew and watched and said nothing, they were the reason I never saw it coming. They were the insulation around the lie, the padding that made it feel safe enough to live in. Losing my ex hurt, but I had already begun grieving that loss before the mudroom. Losing the quiet girl, losing the idea that someone in that room had been honest with me, that was the one that stayed. Betrayal isn't always the person who pushes you. Sometimes it is the person standing next to you who sees you falling and decides that silence is easier than a hand.